nobody was owning them. So I saw an opportunity and grabbed a hold of it and figured if I didn't take ownership of it, then no one would. So I took it from there.
This is Hannah Thomas. A few years ago, she was in hospitality, far from the HR world, but the pandemic changed everything in her career. Today, she owns Workday for Cart.com, 1,600 employees, 14 fulfillment centers, and 8 million square feet of warehouse space, and a remote engineering team scattered across the country. Nobody handed her the system, she taught herself. And in this episode, I'm going to ask her the questions every Workday consultant should be asking, but doesn't. One, how she actually governs Workday at scale, how to rapidly grow within your Workday career, the exact line between handling your internal Workday team and an AMS partner, and the advice she'd give every Workday consultant who wants to be useful at a client site. So whether you sell Workday services or if you're working at a customer, this is going to be awesome. I'm Mahdi, and this is Ask an Expert. Hey Hannah, welcome to Ask an Expert. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Of course. I've been seeing some of your posts on LinkedIn for a while now, and I'm glad we were able to connect. And today we're here discussing everything about Workday. What excites me the most about interviewing you is getting the perspective of the customer side, especially handling Workday for how many years now, right? And so for the people who don't know you, tell us who you are, what do you do in the Workday world today?
Sure. I am Senior Director of People Operations at Cart.com, which is a very wide umbrella. So that means I handle anything from benefits and payroll administration to owning our entire HR tech stack, which of course is, anchored by Workday for about 1,600 people overall.
Awesome. But you didn't have a background in HRIS, and that's one of the first time where you owned Workday at this scale. Tell us about where do you come from and how did you make it until this point?
Absolutely. Systems was not my niche at all. I actually was a career-long hospitality professional. I was serving large-scale banquets and conferences and fancy weddings. And then I often found that these frontline workforces just didn't have the tools to power what their day-to-day jobs. And so I made a pivot into HR. And when I pivoted into HR, I found that what got my juices flowing was systems and process and automation and workflows. And so I stumbled my way over to Cart.com at one point, right as I started 4 days before the Workday implementation kicked off. So I stepped in and joined the implementation team, and it's been like a rocket ship ever since.
Awesome. I have a few questions about the implementation, but I want to backtrack for a second. You said that you pivoted into HR. Was there a specific moment or a realization? What happened exactly that made you pivot to HR?
Yeah, it really was working with, and when I worked in hospitality, I managed frontline workers of anywhere for these events from 5 workers to 80 workers at one time. And I really found that I was always the one who was helping them enroll in their benefits or helping them do their onboarding paperwork, all of these things that to a certain extent drive back to systems because I understood the technology and they may or may not have. And it was always difficult. It always didn't make sense. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I thought if, here's an issue, let me go solve it. So I actually went back to school pre-COVID to do a master's in HR. And then I was able to pivot. I very quickly became a full-time student instead of a part-time student during COVID. And then post-COVID pivoted from hospitality over to HR after I finished that. And the first role I had after that was a company that was looking for a new HRIS system. So I somehow ended up leading the RFP for an HRIS and then being project managing the implementation. And yeah, it was just one thing, kind of just one unique opportunity after another that I seized that kind of sucked me into the systems world. And it's just kept me entertained and it's always exciting.
But you know what I like about what you just said? It took, I think, an incredible amount of self-awareness for you to kind of assess your skills and your interest before kind of going all in and pivoting to HR, going back to school? Because most people I know, they just try to pivot without going back to school, but you went back to school, you took that risk, you armed yourself with your master's before making that jump. So really like that. Props to you. That's amazing. And so when you started that implementation, that wasn't at card.com, right? That was another organization?
Yeah, no, that was at a prior organization, and it was a much smaller HRIS than Workday, but it was
Okay.
similar in the fact that it kind of had customized workflow build outs and whatnot. So work business process equivalent, basically.
Okay. So you still had that experience before moving to card.com, and then you were also involved in the implementation at card.com.
Yeah, I started on a Monday and we kicked off implementation that Friday. So
Oh man. Okay, that would have been crazy. Tell me about the implementation. How was it like?
it was chaos, as is. I mean, if anyone says that their implementation was like smooth sailing waters, I mean, I'd
They're
like to
lying.
meet them, and I think yeah, they're living in a simulation. There's no way.
Yeah.
But we implemented core HCM in about 4 months from February to a mid-June go live, and then we did another 6 month implementation for benefits and payroll specifically, with then like a 1/1 go live the year after. And it was a sprint to the finish. We did 2 different implementation partners for both halves. It just a lot of people internally who had never touched the system, never worked with it, myself included. So it
Yeah.
truly was learning from the ground up while trying to implement at the same time. So I would say that was just the biggest chaos.
Yeah, I think that's the experience of most customers that we talk to. They kind of implement and get trained and change management all at the same time while having a full-time job. So it's kind of crazy. In your experience, how did you get trained? Did you go and attend the Workday classes, or was there any training from the implementation partner?
Yeah, I attended a handful of Workday classes, and so did various people on my team and a few of the HR business partners. And I feel like those do a good job of setting like a basic terminology foundation, basic language. But the biggest thing I found right away is that doesn't necessarily teach you how to run your specific Workday tenant.
Yeah.
They're all so different. So honestly, a lot of community deep dives, a lot of endless hours in sandbox, all the things.
This is so inspiring for someone listening to this or watching this episode who's an individual contributor. If I recap what you just said, I think your greatest qualities were being obsessive about the process, making it as best as possible, but also your self-taught, as you said, and so quickly learning the system kind of differentiated you from others, and you were able to manage a team and become the go-to person. Do you have any other tips in terms of other people? How can they kind of leverage their experience, and then coming from individual contributor to owning a little bit more about the HRIS at their organization?
I'd say the biggest thing is understanding the business that you're currently partnering with. If you're in a consultant space, you have to know the various businesses you're partnering with, right? Or if you're, sitting on the customer side, you can deep dive the exact business you're sitting in. But at the end of the day, you can build the best system the wrong way. And I feel like we see that so many times with Workday, because as consultants or even on the customer side, it's like we've seen it this way, we've always done it this way, so it has to be this way. But every business needs to flex the system differently, and if you don't take the time to listen to what the business is and how it operates, you can't build workflows that align with it. Is the biggest thing for me. And putting those 2 things together, understanding exactly what the end goal is, what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think I relate to it as very much, because Workday as a system, I think you can quickly get to kind of 80% of understanding how it works, but understanding a business takes months or maybe even years. Understanding the people and the intricacies of the business, I think that's super valuable. And if you can do that, then obviously you'll build your career even faster at that organization, and then you can take that learning into another organization if you ever switch. So totally get that. Appreciate it, Hannah. I want to switch subjects, talk about governance. That's the kind of the biggest subject that I always see HRIS lead talk about on LinkedIn. Tell me, well, who's actually governing Car.com?
It really begins and ends with my team, to be honest. We operate incredibly lean, and so the
Hmm.
system overall is owned by myself, and then with a ton of autonomy, for really better or worse some days, I feel like.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we kind of try to pull in stakeholders and collaborators from across the business, whether they realize we are or not. So it's like we may not be in a Workday specific call, but we're always kind of picking people's brains on what their
Hmm.
pain points are, and then molding that into the system. Yeah.
On that note, how do you handle the feedback or the feature requests, if any, in terms of like, okay, you're talking to these people, they're giving you all of those great ideas. Maybe they are waiting for you to implement them. How do you kind of handle those requests?
I think again it goes back to understanding the business, because understanding the business then allows you to prioritize the requests that are coming in based on the impact that they're going to make. I'd say like impact is really one of my big words, in the fact that if something isn't going to be impactful enough, it's not going to, if it's only going to benefit one team or one cost center, is it truly worth the time input? And so, especially with running with a really lean team, it's important for us to be practical in the things that we choose to work on versus the things that we say maybe this isn't right now or isn't right ever. And with having a lean team, it's the more we build out, the more complexity we have to manage.
Did you ever have to say no to a specific demand or request? And, how did you handle it basically?
I mean, I feel like we say no too often, as bad as it sounds. And but it's really it's understanding, and I think this is the difference between growing from an individual contributor up through to owning the system, right? Is being able to understand that just because someone is the loudest in the room and is screaming for XYZ feature or, XYZ fix doesn't necessarily again mean that their ask is the most important. And so understanding how you can navigate saying no without being the bad guy all the time,
Hmm.
and also, being the, I don't know, the workday, yeah, the workday bad guy, basically, in the sense that, oh, it never works, or it doesn't do they never do what we want. But spinning it back to whoever it is with that exact terminology of, hey, this isn't the most impactful, this isn't going to serve the business, like these are the business goals that we have right now, and this is the work that we're aligning to those business goals, and this just doesn't fit the model that's currently set forth for us.
Hmm. Got it. Okay. Uh, Last question in terms of governance. At Car.com, you're telling me that your team is governing everything related to Workday in HR. If an HRIS lead is listening to this episode or watching the episode, and governance is right now on the IT side, or maybe it's mixed between HR and IT, like how would you have this conversation in terms of like, hey, governance needs to sit at this department, and then why? Like, how did you have any experience, talking about those subjects?
Yeah, honestly, I think ultimate government should sit in HR, but I do think it should be more of a cross collaborative approach,
Hmm.
because there's so much that the various sectors have to bring to the conversation, but there's a compliance aspect that HR handles that IT and maybe finance doesn't necessarily always grasp, right? IT may
Yeah.
want to build the most efficient thing, but HR might say, okay, well, that might break the law. So let's
Hmm.
not quite do it that way. So, and kind of breaking down some of those basic scenarios of, for example, why a background check needs to happen in, the before somebody's hired, and things like
Hmm.
that, and knowing that IT has the efficiency in the operational, but HR is able to bring in the compliance and that the more of human aspect, even, really, to be honest.
Love that. I do agree with you. In terms of what I see, most successful organizations, the governance sits with HR, but I do see a lot of mix-up as well. So glad we're on the same team then. Cool.
Yeah.
Uh, digging a little bit deeper into the feature requests and the daily tickets, how do you draw the line between, okay, these tickets, my internal team will handle them, versus, hey, we need, ask an expert on the Workday side or going to an AMS partner? Like, how do you draw the difference?
Sure. It really, some of it comes down to where my expertise ends, to be honest, like being the
Mm-hmm.
SME kind of overall. My technical brain only goes so far. So anything that's an integration is going to be outsourced. Anything that's a module that I have a little bit less understanding in right now, that's benefits. We're going to outsource. I really don't want to screw up open enrollment, and I don't want that to fall on me. So things like that. And then if we are doing anything that's a very long-term project, for example, we launched a subsidiary last year. I built out that with a partner. But at the same time, if there's anything that can be solved with a quick community dive, or anything that is, we own anything internally that's security related, anything that's business process configuration, anything that we've grown a lot through acquisition. And since that's the case, if we were to outsource every acquisition integration and bringing that population in, the cost would be astronomical. So
Yeah.
when we do an acquisition, we handle that completely in-house, in bringing the whole population into the system.
The way you talk, it's so like seamless, but I'm pretty sure that you learned from experience. Do you have any stories to share that you were like, okay, never again, this time, that like next time, it'll be handled internally versus, that next time it'll be handled through a partner?
Yeah, I'd say there's a thin line sometimes. I really wish that I could be more technical. I've definitely tried to dabble in integrations as much as I can, but I'm going to strongly tell you every time I'm functional. And I've had a few times where I've tried to dabble in integrations and I get to the point where I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. And now I've spent 3 days and it's still broken and I should have just outsourced it. So really those are the biggest ones for me. And I'd say the acquisitions are the biggest thing I will always hold internally because they're so fluid in timelines and execution that I can't possibly wait on an AMS partner to respond or action it. I like that. I have an entire process built for acquisitions. I have a template and I know these are the 20 EIBs that I need to be able to load to get the population in the exact order they need to go. These are all of the nuances. And to your point, like that's been refined through trial and error through 10 plus acquisitions. And I can't possibly outsource that. And it would take more time for me to knowledge transfer all of that to an AMS partner than to have them execute it. So...
Awesome, I like that. Yeah, anything that you can systemize with SOPs and like step-by-step process, should be held internally for sure. And I think the goal of every customer is to systemize as much as they can, and then obviously there will be always a small part that they'll need to outsource for sure. Maybe general question that I get often from HR leaders: when growing your internal team, I would assume that you want only experienced people in terms of Workday. Or have you ever hired someone with no Workday experience, but maybe an HR background or a payroll background?
I'd say it's a bit of both, to be honest. I think you need a balance on your team because I think that if you're only bringing in people who have Workday experience, we like to get so dead set in. Workday has 17 ways to do everything. That's the first thing I tell someone who hasn't touched the system is I'm going to show you what I think is best way. But if you find another way, sure, let me know. And I think when you bring someone in who thinks they're a Workday expert, I'll put myself in this bucket even sometimes too. I'm like, no, it's this way. This is the way it has to go. Because this is the way I've always seen it. And we get too much of a set of blinders. But you bring in somebody who doesn't have Workday experience and they're willing to deep dive and dabble around. It's funny how that person ends up even kind of broadening your own perspective.
Okay, I see. Perfect. I like hearing that because, most requirements that I see these days, even online, you need, 10 plus years of Workday experience, etc. But it seems like in reality, and I've seen it as well, a mix in your team is valuable, and even people with other backgrounds can be valuable if they're well trained inside the organization. So appreciate your experience in this. I always like to end with one question that I ask every guest. Knowing what you know today, what would you tell yourself before that pivot to HR?
Buckle in and strap down and be ready for the ride. No, really, more so learn the business before the system, because is my just biggest tagline. Because you can just really build the wrong thing so efficiently, and then you're just going to sit back and watch it fail, and then you're going to be so sad for all of your hard work to just melt away.
Oh wow, I love the tagline. I'll credit you when I say it.
Awesome.
No, that's amazing. Appreciate all of the insights, Hannah. As I said, it's pretty rare that we have people from the customer side join us on the Ask an Expert podcast, which I will do more often this year for sure, because we're learning so much from the other side. All of the knowledge from consulting comes from the customer side, so you're kind of like the original set of ideas. So I appreciate your time and appreciate you sharing your experience with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. I appreciate the chance to chit chat. All things Workday is always fun for me.
And if people resonate with anything that you just said and want to chat a bit more, how can we find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn very easily, or my email is super easy too, hannah.thomas@cart.com, and you'll find me there.
Awesome. I'll link it in the description. Again, thank you very much, Hannah, and hope to chat very soon.
Thanks, Mahdi. Have a great one.
Thank you.